So welcome everybody. My name is Colleen Smith. I'm an IHN graduate. I've been working with IHN for 10 years now. I graduated from the Mississauga campus. I work with Julia in the Con Ed department, and I'm the head administrator. And so I do a lot of different things at IHN, but I want to welcome you to tonight's webinar. So Paul will be hosting our webinar. So the webinar today is on nutrition and the environment, critical but often overlooked factors that impact mental health. So this is an excerpt from our upcoming mental health Con Ed course that Paul runs for us. So Paul, he taught with IHN for over 17 years in our core curriculum, and now he does two of our Con Ed courses for us, nutrition and mental health, and our detoxification. So he's a wealth of knowledge in the mental health, so you will really like it. And then he also works for ISOM, so the International Society for Orthomolecular Medicine. He's the program facilitator there, where he implements projects to increase awareness of nutrients and orthomolecular medicine. So in this webinar, you're going to be learning about specific key nutrients that are involved in brain function and protection. You're going to be learning the key impact of environmental factors and functional factors on mental health and brain function, and then essential nutrients that you must include in all your protocols. So let's welcome Paul, everybody.
Hi, everybody. I am happy to be here today because this is an important topic, and let me just start by sharing my screen. And it's a topic that I was ironically never really interested in because I didn't think there was anything that could be done. I did learn a bit at school at IHN about mental health, largely limited to using tryptophan or 5-HTP to raise serotonin, and but that was it. I attended my first professional conference on mental health probably about 3 or 4 years after I graduated, and it was called the Depression Pandemic, and the presenter, it was 2 days, showed all kinds of science, like published research and crazy amount of detail, and I started to realize, hey, there's a lot more to mental health than or addressing mental health than just a couple nutrients here and there. And that got me on a slippery slope of going deeper and deeper and deeper. I attended my first Orthomolecular Medicine Today conference in Montreal, and half the conference was on mental health. And it was talking about nutrients, and it was talking about using nutrients adjunctively with meds, and basically showing the science, published research. And I was hooked at that point. And then I started using what I was learning with clients and getting a lot of success. Over the years, I've kind of developed some concepts or ways of thinking about this that's a little different from mainstream medicine, that's for sure. And so then I decided I would look into making a course, and then I started teaching at IHN, the mental health course. And yeah, every time I teach, I learn some more, as well as everybody who attends. But here we go. And so I'm going to start this talk by talking about a few things here. And so what things I want you to take away from today, or some things I want you to take away are that there are mechanisms for mental health issues. And I can tell you, most of them are not, oh, I don't think right, or you've got bad habits of thinking and things like that. There are legitimate mechanisms. There are contributions from environment and diet, so we're going to look at those. And there are definitely nutrient connections, mostly nutrient deficiencies, that are what mental health is all about, or lack of mental health is about. And so a lot of times I work with people. I actually get questions from former students and colleagues about, can you really do anything with nutrients and the holistic approach? And yes, this stuff is real. Mainstream media won't cover it all, or very, very little. So it's easy to perceive that it doesn't exist, but it does exist. And I'm going to show you hopefully enough evidence today and enough of the ways I think and concepts that you will buy that there is really a lot we can do with this. And so today we're going to talk about mental health in the context of contributing factors. So what factors promote mental health issues? We're going to talk about it on the nutrient side. So what are the roles of nutrients in preventing problems and then addressing problems? And then I'm going to give you some of the basic first steps of how I approach things. So for me, it boiled down to this after a couple of years. Mental health is a combination of these things. So structure of the brain, what is it made of? How is it put together? Are the regions in the brain functioning properly? Are they over functioning and under functioning? And it's also the cells that make up the brain. And so are they wiring, or I won't do the wiring yet. Are they built right? Are they doing what they're supposed to be doing? And basically, what is their composition? Then we have the wiring. So is the brain wiring properly? Because the brain, I don't know if you can see, it's kind of small here, but it wires. You have these pathways of neurons that wire up through the front and down the back, simplistically saying it. But wiring is influenceable by, if that's a word, by nutrients and environment. We also have neurochemistry. So we have all the other things in place, but are we doing enough neurochemistry? Is it balanced? Are we making the right hormones and neurotransmitters and that kind of thing? Is everything working properly? Do we have the enzymes that make the things work? Are they there? Do we have all the cofactors for it? And is the whole system working properly? And then lastly, but also important, are thoughts. And so habits of thinking, ways of thinking, holding trauma and that kind of stuff. For most people, uh, everything but this, it comes to about 90% or even higher. With some people, this is much, much more, but it's never the absence of these things. So all of this stuff is important. So we're going to look at some of the contributing factors. And the first one is diet. I'm sure you've heard diet this, diet that over and over and over again. So I'm going to skip the usual stuff and get right into, we'll say, the meat and potatoes of this. So 50% of mental health issues are due to a terrible diet. And that's Dr. Amen, who I heard speak in the Integrative Mental Health and Integrative Medicine and Mental Health Conference in 2019. I'd been following him for a couple of years, and I taught some of his concepts in the course for a couple of years. But that is a good quote. And from everything I see, that is probably pretty accurate. One of the things I've learned over the years is most people build their illnesses by what they put in their mouth or don't put in their mouth. So diet negatively affects neurotransmitter activity, inflammatory processes. Inflammation is very important in the brain as a negative driver of things. Oxidative stress, so free radical damage, mitochondrial function, and then the ability to grow and regenerate neurons. So diet affects all of those things. And if you don't do it right, it negatively affects them. Just going to pop into food allergies for a second here and food sensitivities. So they trigger inflammation in the brain. Two of the biggest mediators of brain illness or brain not working properly are oxidative stress, so free radicals and lack of antioxidants and inflammation. They drive a lot of other things downstream. So food allergies trigger inflammation, trigger the way neurotransmitters work, and they're how many of them there are. They can trigger your low blood sugar. Low blood sugar is a common factor in anxiety and bipolar. And so we leave it at that. So 7 foods that account for 93% of all allergy reactions. This is from Dr. Greenblatt, one of the world experts in integrative medicine and mental health. So eggs, cow's milk, wheat, peanuts, soy, shellfish, and fish. And so a lot of people eat those. Not everybody's going to be allergic to all of them, but people who do have leaky gut will be allergic to a lot of things. And then it basically boils down to what do you eat a lot of? Because if you have leaky gut, eat a lot of a certain food, you're more likely to be allergic to that food. So, diet in the context of ADHD, we see a substantial improvement in the cases after eliminating just refined sugar, food additives, and common allergens. So, if you go to a doctor or psychiatrist and you have a child with ADHD, how often are they going to talk about these? Because you can get huge improvement just by doing that. By the way, I'm going to be citing research throughout this talk, and the references are here, but all of this, these little snippets of published research are on the ISOM website, and I'm going to show you about that at the end. So, with ADHD, junk food, so high fat processed food, burgers, fried chicken, blah, blah, blah. Eating that stuff at age 4, and my first question is, who would do that? But a lot of people don't know, shows up as hyperactivity later at age 7, 3 or 4 years later. My question is this. So processed foods, fried chickens, we know are bad. Processed, we know is bad. Snack foods are typically sugar and starch, sugar, chips, and chocolate. Those we know are problematic. Fat, we know is not a problem. Fat, good clean fat, is highly beneficial for the brain. In fact, the brain is 60% fat. So good fat is very good for it. Are the burgers the problem? Burgers themselves are not the problem. Red meat is actually quite beneficial for the brain and the rest of the body. It's everything else that goes with the burger that is the problem. So clean food is really the answer here. But we know if you eat bad, promotes ADHD. And so sugar restricted, additive, preservative free diets with some omega-3s reduce ADHD symptoms. So published research shows clean up the diet, ADHD gets better. The oligo-antigenic diet, that is like the super clean. It's designed to be free of the allergens that most people are allergic to. So when that is done as an elimination diet, so 2 to 5 weeks, we see improvement in ADHD. I kept this in here because this is like pretty much gold. If you have somebody who's allergic to everything, the 4 things that typically they are not allergic to is rice, turkey, lettuce, pears, and water. Actually, lettuce is a new one for me, but there we go. Rice, turkey, pears, and water. These are, if you really need to do a diet to somebody that's highly allergic, I should say, then that is something to keep in mind. I first heard this at one of the first orthomolecular medicine conference I went to, wrote it down, and subsequently forgot what the 4 were. When it comes to diet and bipolar, and so people with bipolar typically consume more of everything that is bad for them. And that with depression risk increases with fast food consumption. Not really surprised there, but it's nice to see it published. And then it decreases with a plant-based diet with fish. It also goes down with animal meat as well, animal protein. Schizophrenia, so check this out. People with psychosis, more likely to eat quickly, so shove it down and skip breakfast and have evening snacks. So if you're eating quickly, it's not going to be bacon and eggs or eggs and veggies and things like that. Skipping breakfast, it ties to the blood sugar. And so when blood sugar crashes, it can induce states on somebody who's already susceptible. And then evening snacks, they're talking about treats and things that are high sugar. Autism spectrum disorder, so things that are tied to psychosis in ASD, to the diet. So vitamin mineral insufficiencies, that's a huge problem in all mental health things. Blood sugar going out of whack, dysbiosis, oxidative stress, inflammation, methylation issues. And a lot of methylation issues actually come from epigenetics. So too many of the bad things like environmental toxins and herbicides, pesticides, and stress, and not enough of the good things like good whole foods and proper balance of nutrients. We have the food sensitivities there, amino acid deficiencies. Typically, people with ASD are low protein, and fatty acid deficiency because, hey, you're not supposed to eat fat, it's bad for you. But when you go low in the fat, good quality fat, it can make you more prone to psychosis. So therapeutic diets for autism kind of goes like this. If you are looking at autism, you're looking at, we'll say, arguably the worst end of the spectrum because there are so many things involved with it. This is a list of all the things, all the diets that have shown to be beneficial with autism. And so if you look at it the other way, the opposite of these diets are the things that are shown to be risk factors for autism. But just because it says autism here, it doesn't mean somebody with anxiety disorder may not have problems with glutamate or gluten and casein, right? So this gives a pretty good perspective of all the components dietary that could potentially be issues with mental health problems across the board. Gluten, I'm sure everybody's heard of gluten. We'll get a little into specifics here. 1 in 7 people experience negative effects from gluten-containing foods. So 1 in 7. When you have clients or you have people with mental health issues, they're probably in that number. They're the 1 in 7, but you're not going to be seeing 6 healthy people. So more people than 1 in 7 are going to have gluten issues. And so gluten, the big issue is damages the GI tract, and then you get less digestion, you get less absorption, more inflammation. One of the components of gluten called gliadin is also a secondary problem because it gets converted into gluteomorphins. These are morphine-like molecules, which explains why a lot of people are addicted to wheat and why they feel good on wheat too. So difference between gluten, or I should say wheat allergy, and gluten sensitivity. So if we have the allergy, it shows up in minutes to hours. If it's non-celiac gluten sensitivity, shows up in hours to days. And if it's celiac, it takes longer to develop, but then it's much more entrenched. Celiac is the genetic component where it's autoimmune against the microvilli. So only a small amount of people have antibody-mediated allergy to wheat. So only a small amount of people are actually allergic to wheat. But most people react to the gluten, or most people who react are reacting to the gluten. So gluten in the GI tract shows up as messing up absorption, inflammation in the GI tract, damage leading to leaky guts, and so you can get muscle pain and things. Dysregulation of the immune system, and the immune system is actually one of the functional components of the brain. So it does good stuff, but it also, when it goes bad, it does bad things in the brain. Brain fog tied to gluten, and then mood changes tied to gluten as well. So gluten and anxiety. So the food most involved in people having anxiety symptoms is gluten, or it contains gluten. And if you take the gluten out, the anxiety goes down. And if you put it back in, the anxiety comes back. And but it's especially an issue, or especially effective, removing gluten in people who are on the anxiety meds and they're not working. And so they will see benefit from that. It's not because the meds aren't working, but the meds aren't working because gluten is overriding any benefits the meds, if there are any, might have. It's schizophrenia, so celiac patients, so people who cannot metabolize the gluten properly, 5 times greater risk for becoming schizophrenic. That's pretty scary numbers. So yeah, we'll just leave that with leaky gut caused by being celiac or having that non-celiac gluten sensitivity, allows undigested food in where they promote inflammation, but then autoimmune reactions. And yes, you can get autoimmune reactions in the brain, and they're tied to several mental health issues. And so patients with celiac or non-gluten celiac have similar markers to people who are schizophrenic. So there's a connection there. So, so the neurological and psychiatric symptoms tied to celiac disease mimic ADHD. So that is something to look out. So ruling out celiac disease would be a good place to start. And I would say ruling out non-gluten sensitivity or gluten sensitivity as well. And so I already talked about this, but with ADHD, gluten worsens things, and especially if they have the non-gluten, so especially if they're non-celiac. So that brings us to exorphins. So exorphins are these molecules that come from gluten. So it's a very short strand. I believe it's 2 amino acids. And so from wheat, so you get gluteomorphin, and if it's from casein, it's casomorphin. And so these molecules, so the very short strands, have roles in normal behavior, regulating appetite and wanting to eat. But when they get too high, they drive addictions. But when they hit the brain, they can cause speech and hearing problems. So think of autistics who always bang in their ears, and brain fog, fatigue, irritability, aggression, moodiness, anxiety, depression, and also affects sleep. So why do people have more, too many of them? Leaky gut is a big problem. So they get down to the two molecules there, and then they just absorb them through before they're digested, because they're supposed to be broken down at the last stage by the microvilli cells. And then microvilli cells make this enzyme DPP4, and so that enzyme, which is supposed to break down that gliadin, is inhibited by gliadin. And so it works like this. Normally, we have the wheat and dairy molecules that are getting broken down to gluten and casein. We have the pancreatic enzymes to break them down to gliadorphin, casomorphin, and then that DPP4 and the microvilli break it down to these dipeptides. And then there's no issues. It's just normal digestion and processing. But when you have low DPP4 or it's blocked, you don't break down these dipeptides, and they go on to activate opiate receptors in the brain. And it was explained to me way back when, I think it was by Dr. Greenblatt, that in 95% of the population, having a small little hit of these these exorphins is actually good, or makes you feel good, makes you feel happy, and everything's good. But in 5% of the population, it takes you the other way, causes anxiety, and stimulates a whole bunch of negative processes. So why are people low in DPP4? Too much wheat and dairy just overwhelms the enzymes. There is a genetic component to it. Antibiotics can increase that the problems with DPP4, candida or biofilms, so not just the candida, but the whole dysbiosis do it as well. Heavy metals, pesticides, and then nutritional deficiencies, because they are, after all, enzymes, and they need protein, and they need cofactors, which are nutrients, to run properly. So exorphins in ASD, so we find higher amounts in the urine and blood and spinal fluid of people with ASD, and the exorphins can explain some components of ritualistic behaviors you see in ASD, or too much activity, perseveration, which is repeating something over and over and over again long after the stimulus is gone, speech delays, and then digestive issues, which we see a lot of in autism. And then in schizophrenia, we see higher concentrations in schizophrenics. And so basically, diets that exclude grains and milk allowed schizophrenics to come out of that significantly faster. Okay, so that brings us to oxidative stress, and time for a little sip of water. So oxidative stress is the context of having more free radicals or free radical generating context than antioxidants that can counter the free radicals. So yeah, our protective capacity of antioxidants exceeded by the reactive oxygen species. So in the brain, you can damage especially lipids and proteins, which are very, very important for brain structure. So the membranes of the brain, which is where a lot of brain activity happens, but also the membranes of the organelles. And so if you damage those things, you start to change the way things function. And so, right, if you have oxidative stress, less antioxidants available for other things like detoxification, and they just basically stress out the detox capacity of the detox components inside the brain cells, especially glutathione. And glutathione is especially important because it's the number one molecule that we use to detoxify. So glutathione, we stick to toxins, especially heavy metals. And then glutathione peroxidase, an enzyme that includes glutathione, is the number one antioxidant, especially in the liver, but also very important in the brain. And then with oxidative stress, you get increased production of glutamate. So the brain is kind of a binary. So it's either excitatory or inhibitory. And a lot of the neurotransmitters in the brain counter each other. They're about 80% of all the neurotransmission in the brain is GABA and glutamate. So glutamate is excitatory, turns up the overall volume of neuron activity or neurotransmission, and GABA turns down the overall volume. When we have too much glutamate, we convert it to GABA. So we convert the stimulatory to inhibitory. We do need to do this. We do it all the time. We've always done it. It's when it gets dysregulated that it's a problem. So oxidative stress increases glutamate. So antioxidants depleted by drug-induced free radicals. So a lot of meds get used in mental health conditions. So here's some of the antioxidants that get depleted. The key ones are glutathione. It's not technically an antioxidant, but it gets built into glutathione peroxidase. We got the superoxide dismutase, and then we have some of these vitamins, the important ones, they get depleted as well. So in ADHD, oxidative stress, we see higher markers, free radicals, and more lipid peroxidation, which is damage to the lipids in the membranes, and less antioxidant activity, and more damage to neurons. And so change in oxidative metabolism reported as a major factor in the cause of ADHD. So it should be becoming quite clear that there are ways to address this stuff, especially with supplementation of antioxidants and eating foods that are high in antioxidants. More on that later. In autism spectrum disorders, markers of oxidative stress found in children include less of the protective compounds and more of the toxic compounds. So we're going to leave it at that. We have inflammation coming up next, and symptoms of inflammation include, so just ask if you've ever seen anybody with these markers, or even do you have them yourself? So lethargy, malaise, or fatigue, decreased concentration, less appetite, decreased interest in pleasurable things, and an overall weakness. So these, can't say inflammation causes them, but inflammation is often present when those are there. So chronic inflammation causes environmental chemicals, including heavy metals, pesticides, things like that, nutritional deficiencies, dysbiosis, sleep. It's crazy, but not sleeping well increases inflammation dramatically, stress, and then personal environment. Other sources, standard American diet, big surprise there, pro-inflammatory. Environmental toxins, infections like Lyme disease, other low-grade infections, and then sedentary lifestyle and allergies, not just food allergies, but allergies overall. So sleep loss, 12-day study, moderate reduction in sleep duration, significantly increased number of inflammatory compounds measured in the blood. And then trauma. So immune systems affected by trauma. So trauma, childhood maltreatment, um, increase or affected immune function in this one study, and that people who had stress in childhood twice as likely to have chronic inflammation. This is a good reason to keep it in the back of your head to ask about people's childhood when things aren't obvious of what's going on, because it could be driving the inflammation. So with depression, I already covered that slide there. Depression, the symptoms are the ones I just showed you before. And inflammation plays a mediating role in the risk of depression and progression of depression. So depressed patients higher pro-inflammatory cytokines and lower anti-inflammatory cytokines. And so with bipolar, in the studies on that, reduced amounts of BDNF, so brain-derived neurotropic factor, are common in bipolar. So, and then reduced BDNF is tied to higher inflammation. So BDNF is this molecule that increases the growth of neurons and the branching of neurons. So if you've come across it, you've probably heard it called miracle grow for the neurons or miracle grow for the brains, because it increases brain function and neurons. So very important molecule, and anything that boosts that is highly beneficial. So lithium, so this study is talking about medical lithium. It's beneficial for treating bipolar in part because it has anti-inflammatory properties. The other property that it has is it increases brain-derived neurotropic factor, decreases glutamate and excitatory neurotransmission. We don't, actually, from what I've heard from integrative medicine doctors, is there's a time and a place for everything. The key to being orthomolecular is knowing what the time and the place is and when it's appropriate. So with integrative medicine, no medication is ruled out strictly because it's a medication. It might be ruled in because at the time it's the right thing to do. So problem with lithium, medical lithium, is the dose is very high and it's quite dangerous for the kidneys and the liver. We have lithium orotate, and forget what the other one is offhand, but the dose is almost like microdosing, very low dosing. It's like 200 milligrams versus 3 or 5 or 20, and yet the benefits are quite similar. So lithium orotate is an interesting molecule, and we'll talk about that when I do the full course. So and tryptophan is a molecule that's very important in the brain, but it gets degraded into toxic molecules in the brain by something called indoleamine dioxygenase, and that enzyme is driven by inflammation. And we see more of that activity in bipolar. So inflammation tied to onset and manifestation of schizophrenia, and it affects the inflammation there affects neurotransmitters, synaptic plasticity, so the ability to adapt, elevates cortisol levels, and it's tied to mood, awareness, behavior. So suicide I found quite interesting because there are a number of nutrient factors that are tied to suicide or suicidal ideation. And there's a number of metabolic conditions that are tied to it as well. And so it's not just I'm feeling bad or I'm depressed. There are reasons for it that we could call them mechanical or biochemical. And so inflammation is one of those. So patients with depression and high suicidal ideation have significantly higher markers of inflammation. And so something to note there. And people with the highest inflammation in this one study were 4.2 times more likely to die by suicide than those with the lowest inflammation. So kind of disturbing. And the other molecule is very important. A very important risk factor for suicide is cholesterol. So low cholesterol is correlated with suicidal ideation. More on that in the course as well, and actually more on that in on the ISOM web pages on mental health. Okay, let's talk about environmental toxins. So, I cover these a lot. I've covered them a lot. We've covered them in the full-time program at IHN. I'm just repeating them there. Ones that might not be thought of, but mold and mold metabolites, even biofilm metabolites can increase risk of mental health issues. And so the key effects of environmental toxins, and they're pretty much the same as other things because they are pro-inflammatory and antioxidant inducing. But some of the other ones, they change the way the cells function. They can promote mutations in cells, and then they can outright destroy the cells. And so these are the conditions, mental health conditions and diseases that there is significant, so fair amount of clinical or epidemiological research that supports that neurotoxins are a problem in these conditions. Twin studies with the ASD, environmental factors accounted for 55% of the risk of developing ASD. And compared to 37% for genetics. What's most of the research on? What's the focus on? It's typically genetics. And so environment is a huge factor there. So, and people with ASD typically more susceptible to environmental toxins because of genetic factors tied to detoxification. It's the big one there. And the hypothesis is they can't detoxify as well, typically because of methylation. We need methylation to do quite a number of things on the detox spectrum there. And sulfation is the ability to add sulfur to detox. And, when we detox molecules, we always generate free radicals. So we need to have good antioxidant activity. And so mechanisms of neuron damage are the same, except we've got microglial activation. So these are the cells that are supposed to be there to gobble up the toxins, but instead they turn on us or they release the pro-inflammatory compounds. We also, mitochondrial damage is especially important in the brain because the brain is a disproportionately large consumer of energy in the body. And so you need energy to run your brain. And if you don't make the energy, then the cells start to misbehave. The organelles start to misbehave. The amount of neurotransmitters you can make goes down, and we get all kinds of problems. So mitochondria is an important thing to look at. Methyl group depletion is another one. This would be methyl groups inside the neurons and other brain cells, and then ultimately decreased production of BDNF. Toxic metals are a problem because they're fat soluble and they store in the fat. The fat is 60%, the brain is 60% fat. And a lot of that fat or the fatty acids in the brain are tied to function. And so if you mess them up, you mess up the function. And the other thing is toxic metals look like minerals, and so they compete for absorption and utilization. And so if you don't have proper nutrition, you lose that protection because they compete. So if you have less, say, calcium or less magnesium, then you're going to be more likely to uptake the heavy metals. In ASD, hair and nail samples show higher concentrations of lead, copper, and mercury, and decreases in the minerals that counter them, like magnesium and calcium and selenium. And the more those concentrations of the heavy metals are higher, the more it correlates with the severity of ASD. And copper excess in 85 or more percent of people with ASD. This is one of the reasons that I don't typically start people off on a zinc formula or basically a zinc supplement that has copper, because from what I have seen and what the research I've been exposed to says is most people are already copper dominant. There's many ways we get it in the environment. So typically I would put the zinc in first, unopposed with copper, and then down the road, we'll use a multi or something to get that copper in. Once we've kind of addressed the possibility of having copper deficiency or copper excess. Mercury can promote anxiety and agitation. Sick. And so not good. And cadmium can affect attention, psychomotor activity, and memory. It's like, hey, where do I get cadmium? Well, cadmium's high in cigarette smoke, high in pesticides, and lots of sources that we're exposed to every day. Well, most people anyway. And exposure to cadmium in prenatal periods tied to anxiety and mood disorders and schizophrenia later in life. And yeah, copper in excess increases the conversion of dopamine to norepinephrine and then epinephrine. So dopamine, we need all three of those, and we make epinephrine, norepinephrine from dopamine, but making one molecule from the others basically helps regulate it. And so if we increase that conversion, we get too low in dopamine and too high in the stimulatory kind of fight or flight panic molecules, norepinephrine and epinephrine. And so we can get that anxiety and agitation. Schizophrenia, so they have roles in development and manifestation. Key ones to look for are aluminum, cadmium, copper, and arsenic. I'm just going to talk a little bit about lead. Lead is an ongoing problem. The consensus out in medicine is, oh, we stopped leaded gas like 50 years ago. Probably not, probably 40 years ago. Therefore, it's not a problem. All the lead that was in the exhaust of those cars that were driving all over North America is still out there. It's still in the soil. It takes millions of years to degrade. And it's going to be an ongoing problem, especially on dry days when the cars drive by the side of the road and kick up the dust, and it kicks up the lead that's in there. And lead, we can get it from a lot of sources. It's still in the lead in a lot of people, or a lot of plumbing, I should say. And yeah, if you're interested in lead in the higher depths, you can look at the website on the mental health, but also I am doing the nutrition and detox, no, clinical detoxification course in continuing ed course in September, and we get deep into these things and what to do about it. But here we go. We got lead, we got psychosis, behavior problems, mood problems, learning disabilities, insomnia, immunity issues, brain damage, delayed infant development, and then thyroid issues. So how many times would you expect that mainstream medicine would be looking for lead in those contexts? I've had clients who have had pretty much all of those things, and they've never been asked about lead. Not surprising, because mainstream medicine's never taught about it. But if it's the lead that's doing the problem and you're not addressing it, you'll never get to the root cause, and that person will never get better. They might get symptomatic relief, but hugely important to look at. So lead's tied to ADHD. The more higher the levels of lead, the higher the hyperactivity and attention deficit behavior. And almost 3 times the odds of inattentiveness and hyperactivity with high lead. So 3 times the odds means 3 times the chance of getting it. If the chance is 1 in 1,000, I'm making that number up, it goes up to 3 in 1,000. So it doesn't mean this massive number. Mainstream media likes to abuse that 3 times the odds thing, but we're going to just keep it real. Okay, when treated with chelating agent, so molecules to pull lead out, main one is EDTA, the lead levels go down and you get clinical improvement. But one thing to note there, sometimes things got worse. So worsening of behavior. And so from my perspective, when people get worse, when they're doing detox, even if it's chelation, it's because their detoxification pathways are not being supported. And what that means is they have nutrient deficiencies that don't allow their enzyme systems in the liver and other parts of the body to do the proper detox. They can't handle the load. So I work differently. I build the body up with nutrients first, and then we take the nutrients that are tied to detox even higher, and that allows the liver to do its job. And when the liver has addressed the toxins that it already has, that signals the body to go bring out the rest of them, right? So something to keep in mind. We're going to talk about nutrients here. And where am I for time? Nope. You have to go a little quicker, I see. So vitamin B3, one of the most important molecules when it comes to mental health issues. There's two main forms that we use, niacin and nicotinamide, slightly different, a lot of similarities to them. So vitamin B3 deficiency is known as pellagra. I'm sure you've all heard that. Pellagra looks almost identical to schizophrenia. Subclinical pellagra looks like anxiety and depression, fatigue. So if somebody has all those things, it might make sense to give them some B3 and do a trial run and see if those symptoms go away, because it could just be vitamin B3 deficiency. Psychosis and pellagra are quite similar. So things that vitamin B3 do is regarding mental health, correct subclinical pellagra, increase serotonin by diverting tryptophan away from serotonin. You ever taken my course, or might be in the notes still, tryptophan is converted to 5-HTP and then serotonin. But if we don't have enough serotonin, we use it to make vitamin B3, technically NAD. So it gets shunted away. And so if we don't have enough B3, we get less serotonin out of our tryptophan. I will leave that for when I teach the course, the rest of it. So help improve the lactate to pyruvate ratio. If that ratio is too high, then we get anxiety disorders. Vitamin B3 has sedative properties, much like benzodiazepines. They don't have any of the mechanisms of benzodiazepines, but they are sedatives. And so they can also increase the effectiveness of sedatives and tranquilizers, anticonvulsants used in schizophrenia and other mental health issues. And so supports the production of NAD, which we use to make energy, very important molecule. So B3 accepts methyl groups that would be used otherwise to make adrenaline. And so epinephrine converted to adrenaline, you absorb the methyl group and you stay with more norepinephrine, and acts like an antioxidant to prevent the production of adrenochrome. I'm going to leave that. Adrenochrome is a very controversial molecule, I will say. But there is some evidence to show that it does have some aspects of driving some of the behaviors in schizophrenia. And I will leave it at that. So amounts used in practice research, between 100 and 3,000 milligrams a day. Dr. Hoffer actually went somewhere around 10 times higher with some patients. And you do need to know what you're doing. I've never had to go above 2 grams with patients. Patients when I'm at the naturopath's office, clients when I'm working at, not in the naturopath's office. So yeah, I do typically 1,000 milligrams of niacin every morning to start my day. Before I go do niacin, wait 20 minutes to get a full-on flush. Then I do a cold shower, and I do some stretches, and then I do my Wim Hof breathing. And I didn't make the correlation, but I have this kind of even keel most of the time, and I suspect it's because of the sedative properties, but there we go. Most people will flush 100 milligrams, and I traveled for 14 days to Scotland and Iceland, didn't do niacin. When I came back, sure enough, flush at 100 milligrams. So people don't like the flush. Some people love it. I'm one of those. But if you don't like it, there's ways to mitigate it. And you start small and you increase the dose. So if you start 100 milligrams, when the flush goes away, you take it up to 200 milligrams or 150. When the flush goes away, you take it up by another little bit. and you can go right up to 1,000 in a couple of weeks if you're so inclined and not get the flush. And so there we go. Other ways to mitigate it, vitamin C will stop that flush. You need a hefty dose to do it, but it will essentially knock that out. Basically, taking niacin with food will do the same thing as well. Interesting to note, niacin neutralize or vitamin C neutralizes histamine. My son, who was allergic to cats and dogs, when we went to visit my brother and his wife and daughter in Scotland, they have a cat and dog, and we preloaded him with 100 milligrams of niacin for the month before, and no symptoms at all. So crazy, interesting to think. So here's something to keep in mind. If somebody goes and they say they do 100 milligrams of niacin and they keep flushing, and a month goes by, 6 weeks goes by, and they're still flushing, look for an ongoing source of allergies. So something is driving that histamine up. So it's actually a good diagnostic for allergies. So I'm going to say it this way. Niacin is very safe under 3 grams, except in people who have current or existing conditions. The biggest one is abnormal liver issues, things like that. It's actually beneficial in some of the other ones, but you do have to use some caution there. The only time niacin has really caused any problems is when people used extended release niacin. That's actually dangerous, and it's no surprise that's the niacin they used in the studies to show that niacin is dangerous. If you're using high dose niacin, so anything over a gram for long periods of time, you should get your patients to get their liver enzymes tested. Nicotinamide is another molecule. It does not cause flushing, so you can use it for that. Yeah, it has some different properties. You have to go higher, about 3 times higher to get the same effect. But Dr. Hoffer uses 1,500, 6,000 milligrams of nicotinamide. If you look at the average bottle of nicotinamide, it's 500 milligrams, so that can scare a lot of people. Yes, you can go much higher than that. Dr. Prowski, who naturopath, who is an expert in mental health and actually getting people off of psychiatric meds, he finds that the dose needed with niacinamide actually is much higher. And it takes a little while to kick in. And I'm just going to skip this, generally safe. And the forms I typically use are niacin or nicotinic acid, niacinamide, inositol it's too late in the day. I was up really early this morning. This one has properties of niacin that are beneficial for cholesterol, but it doesn't flush. So a lot of people will like that one. I'm going to talk about B6 quickly. And yeah, here we go. Conversion of tryptophan to serotonin, required for that. Conversion of tyrosine to dopamine, glutamate to GABA, and reduces lactate. So these are the key ones. These are very important actions in the brain. You need B6 to do it. You need vitamin C to do it. You need magnesium to do it. So there's the 3 no-brainers for mental health issues. And vitamin B6 helps reduce homocysteine. Homocysteine is a pro-inflammatory, pro-excitatory molecule in the brain. And key thing to do, you always ask this question, deficiency of B6, you can see it by the absence of dreams or inability to remember dreams or having disturbing dreams or nightmares. I remember a quote when I was writing the update to Dr. Hoffer's book. The quote in his book was, I give them B6 until they remember their dreams again. And so that's a good diagnostic for having enough. And so autism, the connection there is B6 is required to convert glutamate to GABA, so excitatory into inhibitory. And one of the mechanisms might be poor conversion of B6 to the pyridoxal 5-phosphate, which is the active form. Dosing between 160 and 600 milligrams, improved behavior in the study of autistic children. And so B6 tied deficiency tied to both beginning and progression of depression and confusion, and often resolved with supplementation. In ADHD, the connection is that conversion of tryptophan to serotonin. There's the dosing between 20 and 6,000 milligrams. Keep in mind B6 deficiency potential of oral contraceptives, and especially anxiety and depression. And the studies show that 40 milligrams a day in people taking oral contraceptives help relieve that. And so 150 milligrams, I like to show dosing so you have an idea where the safe and effective levels are. And right, oh yeah, effective in mood symptoms of PMS, and also very successful used adjunctively, which means in conjunction with medications. And so doses of 100 milligrams a day might cause some symptoms, so just watch for that. But magnesium can counter those symptoms. And if you're going to go high dose for a long period of time, you should be monitoring for nervous stuff, because although B6 is good for the nervous system, too much can push it the wrong way. I've never actually gone that high. I've never had a need to. Those are the active forms, or the forms you'll find in supplementation. We'll talk about vitamin C. I'm going to skip vitamin D because that one's obviously good, but hang on a sec here. Vitamin C, antioxidant, anti-inflammatory, serotonin and dopamine production. It keeps nerve cells together, protects the brain lipids, supports thyroid hormone, which is very important for the brain, supports corticosteroid production so you can handle stress, and protects from too much glutamate. And so vitamin C in research reduces psychological stress, lowers cortisol levels, and decreases blood pressure. And symptoms of, so mental symptoms, vitamin C deficiency, decreased focus, cognitive impairment, anxiety, depression, and that kind of stuff, and progression towards Parkinson's disease. Why are people low in vitamin C? Well, you covered all that stuff in the full-time program. I'm just going to leave it at that. Here's the one I'd like to accentuate here. Vitamin C, so about half the vitamin C that gets absorbed into the cells goes through the GLUT receptor, which also does glucose. So more glucose, less vitamin C. Keep that in mind. So one of the reasons people, I'll leave it at that. So vitamin C, it's very important for the levels to keep glucose down. Or if your glucose is up, you need more vitamin C. And I already covered that one. This is just to point out, this was a study that was done, and they took vitamin C samples and vitamin D samples of people coming into the emergency room in the hospital in Montreal. And so 70% had subnormal vitamin C concentrations, and 30% were below the cutoff for scurvy. Vitamin C deficiency is an epidemic. So hypovitaminosis C, so vitamin C deficiency, 10% general population, 30% smokers, and 60% of hospital patients. This is the one that got me. 47% of young non-smoking adults in Toronto have insufficient or deficient vitamin C. So you really should be expecting vitamin C deficiency in most people you see. And I already covered that. 3 grams a day decreased this enzyme, monoamine oxidase. That's the enzyme that breaks down serotonin, norepinephrine, and dopamine, and it in a bad way. I'll leave it at that. Vitamin C, I'm going to skip that. 30-week trial of vitamin C with meds that they were already taken decreased autism severity. With depression, if you give a diet without vitamin C, the participants increased malaise and fatigue, and after 30 days, suicidal ideations. And older people, poorer diets, more vitamin C deficiency, more depression. That's what that says. Schizophrenia addresses inflammation and stress and helps them cope, and helps prevent progression into schizophrenia, psychosis type stuff. And so low in schizophrenics, and right, we'll just leave it at that. Vitamin C is safe when it's used with medications, and 1 gram a day in studies should reduce depression and improve in depression, mania, and paranoia. And schizophrenia, high gram range is needed to saturate the body. It's hypothesized that they have issues actually either absorbing or utilizing vitamin C. So higher ranges. I use a bunch of different forms of vitamin C. We'll leave it at that. I'm going to skip vitamin D. Hang on, I'm going to stop sharing for a second and update where I am. So I decided I would not do the same presentation I did for the last year. And so I brought in a whole bunch of new content and I tried to run, but I forget how much I talk. So there we go. So we're going to skip a bunch of stuff that we will cover in the course. And I will go back to sharing. But I'm going to go right down to, hey, what do we do about all this stuff? And so basic first steps. So a diet for good mental health looks like this. Good protein from animals, plants, or both. The best research for protein talks about animal sources. May not be politically correct, but the research is there. And I wouldn't say it if I couldn't back it up. Okay, fats from animals, seafood, or plants. So fatty acids and cholesterol, very important for mental health. Predominantly plant-based diet. I'm in full agreement with that. Lots of veggies, maybe some fruit. Mostly non-starchy veggies. That's where most people go bad. They think mostly veggies, all right, or plant-based diet is potatoes and rice and wheat. Probiotic foods as well. Avoid things like refined sugar, fried foods, because you're going to get the bad fats in there. Artificial sweeteners are actually toxic to the brain and the body. Food additives, yeah. And then pesticides, pesticide residues. One of the things about pesticides, I'll just pick one, glyphosate. So I didn't do magnesium here. It's very, very important in the brain. One of the key things is it's directly anti-inflammatory in the brain. Among other things, use the balance. You need it to make serotonin, dopamine, and GABA. But glyphosate, which is used as pesticide, binds mercury, binds magnesium. So binds it in the soil, binds it in the plants, binds it in the GI tract, and then it binds it in the body. And so it tends to manifest as magnesium deficiency. So that's why you don't like pesticides. It would be good at some point to identify and eliminate allergic foods. This is a quote from an orthomolecular medicine doctor who I lost the notes like 10 years ago. But I remember the quote, if you take out the bad stuff, it almost doesn't matter what you eat. So a lot of truth to that, I think. Consider doing a trial test. So wheat and dairy, eliminate those. You could do one at a time. I tend to do both. Then go to gluten-free or casein-free, which is much more restrictive, but it gives you more info. And when I work with people, I design all these little tests that we do so that we get clean information. So we go, even if it didn't help, we know that it rules out a bunch of things. Identify and eliminate the allergic foods. Address leaky gut if you think it's an issue, and address dysbiosis if you think it's an issue. So supplementation, vitamin C, I typically take people up to 6 grams for the first couple of months, slowly, but we need to get there to saturate the body. I do, if I really suspect vitamin C deficiency, we'll do both liposomal and some kind of mix of buffered vitamin C's. Vitamin D, most people are deficient, and so the upper tolerable intake is about 10,000. Pretty much everybody needs about 4,000 a day of supplementation, unless it's in the middle of the summer. Magnesium, you can deplete all your magnesium in a single day under high stress. So, well, close to all of it. So I tend to go up to 600 milligrams, but we have done 1200 often with people who are under severe stress. Zinc 50 milligrams. You need zinc to make digestive enzymes, almost all of them. You need to make hydrochloric acid, and you need zinc for virtually every aspect of neurotransmission. And zinc is the mineral that's most likely to be depleted. Fatty acids, if you suspect inflammation, we go into the gram range there for sure. I tend to use mostly plant or fish oils, good clean ones. There is some benefit to using plant-based ones, but it's very difficult to get the right ratio of EPA to DHA in the context of inflammation. And B complex, because the brain needs energy. And if you do a B complex, it helps mitigate the effects of going very high on B3 and B6. And then you do get some of the other Bs that are important for brain health. Typically a multi will come in at some point. Definitely probiotics. And what else we got here? So consider for supplementation things to address oxidative stress. So a bunch of different types of antioxidants like vitamin C for one, to do the water soluble, and vitamin E to the fat soluble, and then others down the road. Antioxidant formulas are good. Anti-inflammatory molecules like the fish oils and things like that, or curcumin and those kind of ingredients. This is a quote from Patrick Holford that I think it was the first time I heard him speak at an orthomolecular medicine conference. You can't just psychoanalyze away deficiencies in essential fats, vitamins, minerals, and other key nutrients. And that's a good place to stop that. I just want to tell you about what we do at ISOM. We have mental health pages on addiction, anxiety, bipolar, schizophrenia, ADHD, autism, depression, and suicidal ideation. Much of the content you saw today came from there. And I reworked it for this talk. What I do with these is basically it's a breakdown of here's what it is from an orthomolecular perspective, which would be the holistic. And here are the things that drive it, so the contributing factors. And then is how nutrients are involved with it, nutrient deficiencies, and using nutrients, the benefits. What I do with this most often is when somebody wants to work with me and they go, I got anxiety or depression or even schizophrenia, I go take a look at the page and you will see how we will be working together. And if that resonates with you, then we can start working. We'll set up an appointment. So it is a very good, what we're going to do for you, this tells you whether it's for you or not. So we have lots and lots of medical doctors who send their patients to these pages. So quite good. Here's the book I spent a year putting together and then getting excerpts from or passages written from Dr. Prowski and Dr. Greenblatt. That one's available on Amazon. The course, what I'm doing, the continuing ed for IHN is nutrition and mental health. It starts in May 1st. There's 1 week off when I'm at the Orthomolecular Medicine Conference in Scottsdale this spring there. But it runs 7 sessions starting at 6:30 to 9:30. We go way in depth into these contributing factors and how nutrients are involved and what to do about it. We do protocols and case studies. So there you go. And that's it. You can find more about it on the website, and there are promo emails that come out, and you can see it there. Oops. And that is that. So now we go to Q&A, and I will.
Yeah. Okay, so let's see who has questions. So thank you, Paul. That was very informative. You always share a lot of information and kind of give people a good idea of what's going to be offered in the course. So let's start with questions. Okay. Okay, let's just see. One person, Wendy, said, I don't know which slide she was meaning, but she was saying, should she eat chocolate because it has heavy metals?
My brain's going, well, don't eat heavy metals, right? So it's a no-brainer. But the real question is, does really good quality chocolate have enough heavy metals in them to be a problem? Um, and I would say the answer is probably no, or that the dose makes the poison. So if you're going to be eating a full chocolate bar every day, then you're going to get more heavy metals. And by the way, that would be the least of the concerns, because if you're eating a lot of chocolate, then you're definitely getting sugar. Now, if it's really um, the high cacao component, like the 85 or 90%, then not so much an issue. But then who can eat a whole giant chocolate bar at that? Um, anyway, I hope that answers it. It depends. That's the answer.
Mhm. So Carrie Fuller, she had a few comments. She said she loved the flush, but then she said, so I'm assuming it's when you're talking about the niacin. So she just said, except vitamin C is a problem for diabetics. You agree? You want to add anything to that? I don't know what context she was meaning, but
Yeah, I'm not sure what problem for diabetics means. I think I remember when I taught this in preventative, the issue was that it makes the body's insulin system work better. And that will be a problem when you're on meds. So you have to make adjustments or considerations for it working better. It also could depend on how bad the kidneys are already currently involved, and other issues there. So you don't really have to go super high doses, and you can use other antioxidants. I would always use vitamin C because it's universal in the body. It gets into every cell if the dose is right. But you can use other antioxidants as well.
okay, so let's just see. So Paulina asked, what is the best way to detox heavy metals?
Yeah, we cover this in the course, but I can do it this way. Um, you must increase your glutathione boosting nutrients because heavy metals are primarily done detoxed with glutathione or sulfur containing enzymes. They are primarily conjugated to, so the enzyme works on it and sticks it to primarily glutathione or sulfur or methyl groups. So you must boost those, and then you must also boost the binders. So the chlorella, spirulina, activated charcoal, uh, diatomaceous earth, and bentonite clay. Now, you don't have to do all of those, but some combos of those, and it depends which heavy metal you're trying to get out. And then ultimately, you must go very low and slow. Always build nutrients for, I always build people's nutrients for 1 to 3 months before we even look at detoxification. And then once they have the nutrient status, then we do that stuff I just described.
Okay. Um, Stephanie's asking dosage of niacin for deficiency and for how long?
Right. Um, Depends how bad the deficiency is. You conceivably could do just a B complex, like a B100. And I typically start people on a B100 either once or twice a day. Run it for a month, see what symptoms are still remaining and what indicators of, we'll say B3 are still there. And if they're still there, then I typically take people slowly up to 500 milligrams. But a lot of people, they'll do 100, and whatever symptom they had that we use the indicator is gone and they feel good and they can stop, or they'll just stay at 100.
Okay, so you may have kind of answered this already, but general B complex containing B3, is it as good as niacin by itself?
No, so it's way too low. It it's therapeutically nice in somewhere between 100 and 3 grams, 100 milligrams, 3 grams. Typical B complex will have somewhere between 60 and 100 milligrams, so or less, 60 or less. So it's a good place to start, but I would go on top if needed.
Okay, and then Stephanie also asked, is ascorbic acid a good form of vitamin C?
Yes. So one thing to keep in mind is virtually all the research up until recently on vitamin C and cancer and everything else was done with pure ascorbate, unbuffered, or sodium ascorbate. But remember, it's ascorbate that gets into the cell. So ascorbic acid, it's not buffered to anything. bioflavonoids do not get into the cell. They may help at the absorption level, but it's the ascorbate molecule that does the work. So for me, I do 1 teaspoon of pure ascorbic acid, so 4 grams of vitamin C, ascorbate, and in a little bottle of water, and what is it? It's 150 milligrams of magnesium citrate, the stress relax formula from Natural Factors, the berry flavor, and those two together, it's almost like a berry lemonade type thing. It makes it tolerable. Knock it back is almost a shot. And then you got to rinse your mouth because ascorbate will rot your teeth. So you rinse your mouth out. So I do that plus 1 or 2 liposomal vitamin C's a day. So yeah, with cancer, you can use liposomal C and the pure ascorbate in high doses, building up to tolerance, to get reasonably good, close to IV vitamin C, low level IV vitamin C. All right.
Okay, so someone said, thank you for the information. It was very helpful. Are you going to share your slides with us?
Um,
Well,
I'm going to say no because I don't own some of this stuff. Right.
okay. So, well, we're going to be posting the replay on YouTube. So Julie will email it out to anyone who registered, and then you can watch the replay. So you'll be able to see all the slides when you watch the replay, and it'll eventually be posted to our YouTube channel. So,
Right.
so Shirley is asking, please explain glyphosate binding to magnesium.
Right. It sticks to magnesium, so it's like a chelator. And so when that glyphosate binds, you see my hands, this is magnesium, glyphosate kind of binds to it. And then all the systems in the body that, like say the absorption, it's too big to be absorbed properly with glyphosate attached to it, or it doesn't have the right molecular shape or charge to be incorporated into enzymes. And so it just disrupts how it gets used.
Okay, so I guess magnesium would be beneficial then for that
Yeah,
purpose.
high dose magnesium can actually help push glyphosate out of the body. So,
Okay.
yeah.
When you talk about cadmium from cigarette smoke, is it the tobacco itself or other components or additives in conventional cigarettes? And is it equally as toxic as secondhand smoke?
Right. From what I understand, is the cadmium comes from the pesticide they use on the tobacco. So people who smoke organic tobacco, I've heard this many times. You have to smoke like 3 of them to get the same hit that you get off of regular tobacco. Not because of the pesticide, but because of the other crap they do in there to make it addictive. But yeah, the cadmium comes from the pesticide. And can you get it from secondhand smoke? Yes.
Okay. Okay, so Carrie's asking, do you see dental health amalgams overlooked as a contributing factor in mental health?
Yeah, absolutely. The question is how big it is. And it boils down to a few things. One, are they overwhelmed with everything else? Number 2, are they able to detox heavy metals in the first place? And number 3, what are the state of the amalgams? Because the correlation between amalgams and how much mercury is not how many amalgams, but it's how much surface area do you have. So there are a lot of contexts where you would not have to take the amalgams out if you can't do it. But things like cancer and also we got their metabolic disease and a couple others, you must take it out.
Okay. So I have one, Wendy raised her hand, so I don't know whether she typed her question in there. So let's just see if I can, I'm gonna allow her to talk so maybe she can ask her question. Oops, where did Wendy go? Oh, she just took her hand down. So I guess maybe, I guess maybe her question was already answered there. So, okay, what about blue light and screens for mental health?
Yeah, that was interesting. I know there's a lot of science in it. I haven't personally looked at the studies, so I don't know the validity. I kind of trust the people who do them, or who are promoting it. I think the biggest issue is the monitors. Um,
Mhm.
the reason I don't believe it 100% is look outside on a sunny day. What color is that light? It's blue, right? So, um, however, if you're looking down your hand or looking down your feet, it's more yellow. So, I'm not really sure. I think I know enough people that get benefit from black and blue light to say there must be something there. So, I do have blue light glasses and I wear them when I know I'm going to be spending 8 hours on the computer.
Mm, okay. Okay, so that is all the questions. So I don't have any other questions. So, oh wait, I see Wendy's hand still there. So maybe she does have a, maybe she does have a,
Maybe he's waving
I
goodbye.
swear I looked and it was just, I didn't see her hand there, but maybe she raised it again. So let's just see. Okay, I'm going to, allow her to talk. Okay, can you hear Wendy? You want to ask your question? Oh, okay, maybe she's putting it in the
There we
chat
go.
there.
What about
Okay.
parasites and mental health? Oh, I love it when people ask questions where I got a good story. When I was at that integrative medicine and mental health conference, I one of the last lectures I attended in the 3 days was about uh, parasites and other pathogens in mental health. And I was sitting in a room with 300 psychologists and psychiatrists, and uh, and I know that because the speaker made them raise their hands, and she counted them out. And so it was like really weird. I was the only nutritionist in the room apparently, and then she went through all the different parasites and all the molds and all the things like that in an hour, and it was horrifying. And at the end, she said, if you're a psychologist or psychiatrist and you are not looking at mold or parasites, I consider that malpractice. So, yes, those things need to be looked at. I don't know if I would start, actually, I would not start with them because the effects of those would not be revealed until you addressed not revealed clearly until you address nutrient deficiencies and the other more common things. But yes, definitely a component.
Okay, so this was Wendy's question. Well, she says using lavender and diffuser for sleep, and then she says she doesn't like using valerian root. So, do you have any opinions on valerian root? I guess for people who have sleep issues.
Right. Um, Lavender has beneficial properties. There's research that shows that it is calming. Valerian, using it as a tincture, I mean, it's highly effective. Um, but in some people, it's not so good. Some people I've seen get agitated from it, actually, the exact opposite. If you're dealing with sleep issues, and my first statement is who isn't? Because in the last 6 months, uh, pretty much every single person I've talked to, family, associates, and things, wake up at 3 in the morning, and within 5 minutes either way, every night, there's some shenanigans going on. I won't get into it. I suspect there's something going on over and above. I can't sleep. But things to keep in mind, melatonin is highly effective for sleep. We just had a discussion with a naysayer on melatonin, going at, uh, my wife and I do 15 milligrams a day because it is anti-inflammatory in the brain. It's the main antioxidant, one of the main antioxidant molecules in the brain. It's one of the main anti-cancer molecules in the brain. And so this person said 15 milligrams is too high. It's like, well, based on what? So you got to ask the question, what's the LD50 for melatonin? Uh, so lethal dose 50 this is the marker they use for everything. What is the LD50 for melatonin? Never got high enough to find one. There are people who take 30,000, that's 200 milligrams and up with cancer. And I actually have this study. They gave people, I think it was 200 milligrams a day for 3 months, and then they stopped them cold turkey, and then they measured their endogenous melatonin levels the next day, and they were absolutely normal. Okay, so that said, sometimes people take melatonin and they're groggy in the morning, it doesn't work. from what I understand, it's because they don't have a good enough nutrient base to actually metabolize the melatonin down at the time it should be. Some people who really can't sleep, you go melatonin plus, so the sublingual immediate release, and then you add a prolonged release as well. And then if that doesn't work, then we add something like sleep aid, which is a combination of melatonin and then a bunch of herbals. All right.
Okay, so one other question kind of popped in there. So does red light and infrared light help anything in the health field?
Yes, it does. Um, and I was a big naysayer for a long, well, non-believer, we'll say for a long time. But I have seen people talk about it who I trust, and I've collected clinical studies. Um, I remember one naturopath talking about this guy who had a non-healing wound on his arm. I think it was about an inch long. It went through all the layers of skin and it just wouldn't heal. And I think it was 7 days on red light therapy. I think it was like an hour a day and it's healed. So you can't make that stuff up. So there is benefit to that.
Okay, so I think that's all the questions. So now we will do the webinar. So I put, oh, actually, but one more person raised their hand. So okay, let's just do, okay, so let's, it's Lolita. I'm gonna allow her to talk. Okay, you can unmute yourself and ask your question, Lolita.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yep.
Hi, Paul. Thank you so much. It was so nice to see you after so many years.
Yeah.
Actually, I typed my question, but I think my question is that those patches which you get nowadays, which has herbs like ginger plus certain other herbs, and it is pasted under the feet overnight, and in the morning it becomes black. So that means all the toxins have been removed. Do you recommend? Do you think it is a good thing? And do actually like we are detoxing by them or?
Yeah. You know what? This is another one I have trouble with because I know the skin does absorption and we do release through the skin. Whether doing it that way is is there enough molecular transfer to actually do that? I find it hard to believe. But when I was at that conference, there was a company that was selling these detox foot baths, and they had done, I think, about 10 studies that they published. And I looked at the studies and they look pretty good. So I think there's some validity to it. I would say that most of them, probably not. It's very easy to put a molecule in that turns black when it's exposed to skin. Even silver will do that.
Oh,
So the so it's easy to cheat, but I've also seen studies where it's valid. So I'm going to say I think it depends on which product you're using. And yeah,
thank you. Thank you.
you're welcome.
Oh, sorry, Lilia, I missed your question. I didn't scroll down further.
No worries. Thank you so much, Colleen. Nice to see you. Thank
Oh,
you.
nice to
Yeah,
see you
you're
too.
welcome.
Okay, so we have Wendy raised her hand one more time. So let's just see if Wendy wants to ask her question. Okay. Oops, oh, maybe maybe she took her hand down. So okay, I guess she okay, now we'll do the draw. So I put everyone's
Right.
name in the yep.
Right. And so if your name is drawn, email me so that because I want to make sure I have your exact email. The school will also email it to me too, but sometimes I can't find them.
Oh,
Oh,
so you want to know what? Once I pick the winner, I'm going to get them to put their name in the chat, and then
uh,
I'll connect with them, and then connect them with you, and then you can yeah, I can give them your email. So okay, so I have
excellent.
all your names in the bowl here. So let's just pick a name. Okay, so let's just see if this person is still on the call. Deepti. Let's just see. Oh yes, okay. So it was Deepti Batra. I just saw her in the list. So there. Oh yes. Okay. Perfect. Okay. Do you want to put your email address in the chat, and then I'm going to connect with you tomorrow, and then we'll connect you with Paul to get you the book. So the prize is actually it's the Light on Schizophrenia book that Paul was talking about earlier.
It's behind me on the shelf, if you can see it.
Oh yeah, I can. Yeah, oh, there it is. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Well, thank you everyone for joining us. Paul, I'm
I think
actually gonna.
you can draw a second one as well.
Oh, okay. Okay, perfect. Okay, so here. Okay, let's do one more name. So here I have Shreya Jane. Is Shreya still on the? Oh yeah, Shreya is there too. Okay.
Well,
Okay, so Shreya, do you want to put your name or your email in the chat too? And then, okay, so you guys, Paul went over all the dates of the Con Ed course, so I'm going to put my email in the chat. So if anybody is interested in joining, they can actually email me and I can give them more information on how to register. You can also go to our website and then you can click there to register and we'll get your information and respond to you too. So, okay. Okay, so any other questions for Paul before we wrap up? Okay, so I put my email there. Oh, somebody else is raising their hand. So Lolita was raising her hand again. So 1 second. Okay, so okay, Lolita, you had another question?
No, no.
Oh, I guess maybe your hand just didn't.
Well, we have to do something here. I don't know.
Oh no, we're doing the draw, so we're pretty much done now. So yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
all right. Well, thanks everybody for coming.
Yes. Thank you everyone for coming. If anybody has, I will get the 2 webinars and I'll connect you with Paul. So have a nice night, everybody.